I was headed to the airport with my late husband's will, but I forgot it. It started like any ordinary morning. Or at least, what passes for ordinary when you're a 63-year-old widow navigating the aftermath of losing the only man you ever truly loved. I had just buckled my suitcase in the back of the Uber, one foot already in the car when I froze. The will. Jack's will. It wasn't in my bag. It wasn't in my carry-on. My stomach dropped as I pictured it sitting exactly where I had last seen it, on the corner of my desk at home, half tucked beneath my reading glasses. I remember murmuring a rushed apology to the driver, promising I'd be back in just a few minutes. He nodded, probably annoyed, probably used to people like me forgetting something vital. But this wasn't just forgotten medication or a misplaced passport. This was the document that decided everything. My husband Jack had been gone for nearly 10 months. Pancreatic cancer took him faster than either of us were ready for. And every time I closed my eyes, I still saw the hospital light glinting off his pale, thinning face as he squeezed my hand one last time. The will had been a quiet point of contention. He didn't want to upset the family dynamics. I told him the truth, that nothing tears a family apart faster than unspoken expectations and surprise inheritances. So we worked on it together. It stated, clearly and without ambiguity, that the house would remain mine for as long as I lived, and upon my passing, it would be divided equally between our two children, David, our son, and Emily, our daughter. Jack also left money in trust funds for each of our grandchildren, and made specific bequests to friends and charities he believed in. But there was one part that always made my stomach twist. A clause Jack insisted on adding. If either of our children attempted to pressure or manipulate me into changing the will after his death, they'd be disinherited entirely. At the time I thought it unnecessary. Now I wasn't so sure. I reached home in under 10 minutes. I told the driver to keep the meter running. I wouldn't be long. The house was quiet as I climbed the porch steps, my keys jingling softly in my hand. I didn't expect anyone to be there. David and Melissa, his wife, lived just down the street but usually called before stopping by. I turned the key and pushed the door open gently. And then I heard them. Whispers. In the kitchen. Just beyond the archway. I was about to call out. David must have come by to check on the house or maybe grab the spare car key, but something in their tone stopped me. It wasn't casual or affectionate. It was cold, cautious. I held my breath and stayed in the shadows by the front door, heart pounding like a snare drum. I'm telling you, Melissa hissed. She won't last another year in that house. She's still grieving. We could suggest she move into a retirement community. Say it's for her own good. David's voice was quieter, but I could still make out his words. I don't know. Feels wrong. What if she suspects something? Melissa scoffed. It's not wrong if we're protecting what's rightfully yours. Your dad would have left it to you anyway, if she hadn't talked him into that stupid clause. There was a long pause. Then David spoke again, his voice heavier. She has the will with her. She's taking it to her lawyer today. Melissa's voice sharpened. Then we need to do something before she signs anything permanent. I felt like the floor fell out from beneath me. I gripped the wall to steady myself, barely breathing. My son. My only son. Plotting behind my back. I had no idea how long I stood there, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. A part of me wanted to storm in and scream. Another part of me wanted to collapse and cry. But what I did next wasn't either of those things. I quietly stepped back, eased the door shut, and retreated down the porch steps as if I were walking away from a fire I couldn't yet put out. When I slid into the back seat of the Uber again, the driver gave me a polite glance in the mirror. Find what you needed? He asked. I nodded automatically. Yes, thank you. But the truth was I hadn't found the will, at least not in the physical sense. What I had found was something far more chilling. A glimpse into the heart of a betrayal I never imagined I'd face. The ride to the airport was a blur. Planes took off overhead, Cars rushed past, and all the while my thoughts churned in a loop of disbelief and dread. My son. My David. The same boy who used to climb into bed beside me during thunderstorms. The same man who held my hand at Jack's funeral, squeezing it every time I sobbed too hard to breathe. Had all of that been real? Or had something in him changed, hardened since Jack passed? I made it through security, clutching my bag like it was a life raft. My flight to Boston was for a meeting with Jack's estate attorney, someone we trusted deeply. We were finalizing everything before probate closed. The will I forgot was digital too, but the paper copy had all of Jack's handwritten notes in the margins. Notes about our children, reminders to be fair, scribbled memories that made it feel less like a legal document and more like a letter from the man I'd loved for 41 years. When I finally sat at the gate, I pulled out my phone and stared at David's contact. For a moment I almost pressed it. I wanted to call him, demand answers, scream into the phone until something made sense. But I didn't. Instead, I opened the Notes app and wrote something down. They think I don't know. I don't know what compelled me to do it. Maybe it was just the first step in reclaiming power. My way of reminding myself that I wasn't just a grieving widow, or a frail old woman they could manipulate. That I still mattered. The flight was uneventful. The meeting with the lawyer, Mr. Cantor, was formal but kind. I handed him the digital file, told him the original had been left behind, and we went over the details again. I didn't mention what I'd overheard. Not yet. But I watched his face carefully as I asked him a quiet question at the end. If someone were to interfere with my decisions regarding the estate, I asked, my voice careful, what recourse would I have? He looked at me for a long time, folding his hands on the polished mahogany desk. Are you concerned about something specific, Margaret? He asked gently. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I smiled in that practiced, polite way older women learn to do when we've been underestimated our entire lives. Just curious, I said. Jack was always very protective. I want to honor that. He nodded, and in that moment I think he understood there was more going on. He leaned forward. You always have control, he said firmly. As long as you're mentally competent, and believe me, you are. No one can override your decisions. And if someone tries, well, Jack was smart to include that clause. It has legal teeth. I left the office with my heart pounding, a little stronger than when I walked in. But what came next was something I never expected. Because when I returned home 2 days later, something was missing. I stepped into the house the same way I had left it, keys in hand, cautious, heart tight in my chest. But this time I knew better than to assume safety just because the walls looked familiar. The air felt wrong. Too still. Too silent. I walked straight to my study, trying to keep my mind from spiraling into paranoia. Maybe David and Melissa had come back. Maybe they'd seen I wasn't there and left again. Maybe I was just being dramatic. But when I reached my desk, my heart stopped. The drawer where I kept the original will was slightly open. Not wide, just a crack. But I never leave drawers open. Ever. And the corner of the manila envelope that once held Jack's will was sticking out at an odd angle, like someone had shoved it back in too quickly. I pulled it out and opened it with trembling fingers. Empty. Gone. Every page. Every note. Every scribble of Jack's handwriting vanished. I stood there for a full minute, unable to move, the blood draining from my face. My hands went cold. I felt for the first time not just betrayed but hunted. They had come into my home, taken his will, while I was barely gone 48 hours. It wasn't just about greed anymore. This was a quiet assault on Jack's memory, on my safety, on everything we had built together. For a moment I just stood there, gripping the empty envelope, trying to breathe. My eyes flicked around the room, as if the papers might have slipped out and fallen to the floor. But I already knew they hadn't. And then something happened that made me feel like the air was being sucked from the room. My phone buzzed. A message from David. Hey Mom. Everything okay? Just checking in. Let me know if you need anything. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. The nerve. The audacity to pretend like nothing had happened, as if he hadn't stood in my kitchen and conspired with his wife to remove me from my own life. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed space. I needed to think. I placed the phone down and did something I hadn't done since Jack passed. I poured myself a glass of scotch from the bottle he kept on the top shelf, the one we only brought down during holidays or difficult news. And then I sat in his armchair, cradling the glass, staring into the fireplace that hadn't been lit in months. That's when I knew. I couldn't pretend anymore. Not just about the missing will, but about David. About the truth of what my son had become. Whether it was Melissa whispering poison in his ear or some darker, colder part of him I had never seen before. It didn't matter. He had crossed a line. And I wasn't going to let it go. Jack used to joke that I had a memory like a steel trap. You forget nothing, he'd say, half admiring, half wary. It's impressive, and slightly terrifying. He wasn't wrong. Because as I sat there with that empty envelope in my lap, something clicked in my mind like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Jack had made 2 copies. I remembered it suddenly so vividly it felt like a punch. He didn't tell the kids, didn't even tell me right away, but months before he died he called me into the study and pulled out a slim, unmarked box from beneath the floorboard behind his filing cabinet. It's just in case, he'd said, that soft finality already in his voice. People change when you die, Maggie. Sometimes grief makes them better. Sometimes not so much. We never talked about it again. After he passed, I'd left that box untouched. I thought I wouldn't need it. Now I realized it might be the only thing standing between me and a future I didn't choose. I got up slowly and crossed the room to the filing cabinet. My knees ached. Grief has a way of aging you twice as fast, but my hands were steady. I pulled the cabinet away from the wall and crouched down. There, in the dusty corner where the wood was slightly uneven, was the hidden seam Jack had shown me. I pried it open with the edge of a letter opener. A thin box lay inside, wrapped in one of Jack's old flannel shirts. When I opened it, I couldn't help but laugh, just once, sharp and bitter. The second copy of the will was there, along with a USB drive containing a digital backup. There were notes in Jack's handwriting just like before. Dates, signatures, reminders. I clutched the box to my chest and stood. They thought they'd erased him. Thought they could scare or gaslight me into handing over everything. But Jack had prepared for this. And so had I, in my own quiet way. Still, I knew I couldn't confront them yet, not directly. If they were willing to break into my home and steal a legal document, what else were they capable of? No, I needed something stronger than rage. I needed proof. And I needed an ally. That night I called Emily, my daughter. She picked up on the second ring. Mom? Everything okay? Her voice was warm, steady, a little concerned. She'd always been the more cautious of my 2 children, gentler, more thoughtful. Maybe a little naive or maybe just unscarred. I said softly, I need to talk to you. But not over the phone. There was a pause. When? As soon as possible. Come by tomorrow morning. I'll be there at 9, she said. You sound weird. I'm okay, I lied. I just need you to hear something. After we hung up, I stared out the window into the dark street. I half expected to see Melissa's car parked nearby, headlights off, engine idling. But the street was quiet. Still, I locked every door and every window before I went to bed. Not because I was scared exactly. Because I was ready. Emily arrived just before 9 like she said she would. Punctual as always, with a cup of coffee in one hand and a knit scarf she had probably made herself wrap tightly around her neck. She looked so much like Jack in that moment, it caught me off guard. The same wary kindness in her eyes. The same gentle way she held space for other people's pain. She stepped into the kitchen and glanced around. Everything looks fine, she said slowly. But you don't. I didn't answer. I just motioned toward the dining room table. She set the coffee down and sat across from me. I didn't even ease into it. I need you to listen before you say anything, I said. And I need you to promise not to tell David. Not yet. Her brows pulled together. What's going on? I pulled the hidden box from under the table, set it in front of her, watched her eyes widen as she slowly opened the lid. This is Dad's will, she whispered. Wait, there's another copy? I nodded. The original went missing while I was in Boston. I had it in a drawer. David and Melissa. I overheard them talking before I left, planning to push me into signing something else. Then I came home and the will was gone. Her eyes went dark with confusion and dawning anger. Are you saying they took it? I'm saying they were the only ones who knew I'd be gone, I said quietly. And that I heard them talking about getting me out of this house. Emily blinked, visibly shaken. But, David, he wouldn't do something like that. He wouldn't risk. Do you think your father added that clause in the will because he didn't trust strangers? She didn't answer. I wish I didn't believe it, I added. I still don't want to. But I'm done making excuses for him. Your father trusted me to carry this out. And I'm going to. Emily sat back in her chair, her face pale. I had no idea, she murmured. He's been so different lately. Detached. And Melissa. She's driving this, I said. But he's going along with it. Emily's face hardened slowly but surely. What do you need me to do? It was my turn to pause. I hadn't gotten this far in my planning. Part of me didn't expect anyone to believe me. Part of me didn't know what to ask for. But in that moment, something inside me steadied. I need you to help me record them. If they come here again, if they talk about the will or try to intimidate me, I want it on tape. I want proof. And I want you there with me. Emily nodded without hesitation. Done. That moment, small, quiet, felt bigger than anything else that had happened in weeks. Because for the first time since Jack died, I didn't feel alone. David texted that afternoon. Hey Mom. Mind if Melissa and I swing by tomorrow? Just to check in. We could bring lunch. He was testing the waters. I could feel it in the wording, mind if, just to check in, like he already sensed the current had shifted. Like he was still hoping I hadn't noticed the missing will. I showed the text to Emily, who was sitting beside me at the kitchen table, laptop open, headphones around her neck. She'd spent the last hour researching voice recorders and local attorneys, just in case. Tell him to come, she said. We'll be ready. I didn't reply right away. I let the message sit there unread for hours. Let him wonder. That evening, I sent a simple response. Tomorrow works. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed early. But I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening for creaks in the hallway, shadows shifting beneath the door. It wasn't fear anymore, it was alertness. A kind of primal readiness I didn't know I still had in me. When morning came, Emily helped me place a small voice recorder beneath a stack of books in the living room. Another in the kitchen drawer, barely visible. She even installed a basic motion-activated camera by the hallway bookshelf. You're not paranoid, she said gently as we checked everything one more time. You're being smart. At 11:06 a.m. the doorbell rang. They came bearing Panera bags and practiced smiles. David kissed my cheek like he always had. Melissa gave me a hug that felt like a performance. Turkey and cheddar, right? David said, setting the bag on the table. I remembered. I nodded and offered a tight smile. Thanks. That was thoughtful. We made small talk for a few minutes about the weather, the garden, some neighborhood gossip they clearly didn't care about. Melissa played with her wedding ring, eyes scanning the room. David kept glancing at my purse. They were looking for it. For the will. Funny thing, I said finally. When I got back from Boston, the drawer where I kept Jack's will was empty. David froze for a half second, then recovered with a tight smile. Really? Maybe you moved it and forgot. I looked him in the eye. I didn't. Melissa set down her coffee with a little more force than necessary. Well, accidents happen, she said smoothly. Paperwork goes missing all the time. That's why lawyers keep digital records, right? Emily appeared in the doorway just then, holding a notepad. That's true. But breaking and entering is still a felony, regardless of what you're looking for. Melissa's face went blank. David turned pale. Emily, what are you even talking about? She crossed the room and sat beside me. She heard you, Emily said. Before the Boston trip. She heard what you said in the kitchen. About getting her out of the house. About stopping the will from going through. David opened his mouth, then shut it. Melissa's jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. You stole from your own mother, Emily said quietly. And from Dad. You tried to erase his final wishes. But you didn't know about the second copy. Silence. Thick humming, brutal. Then I stood. I don't want to fight, I said. But I will protect what your father and I built. If you try to pressure me again, if you come into this house uninvited or interfere with the will in any way, Jack's clause takes effect. You'll be disinherited. Fully. I have the legal power. And now I have proof too. Melissa scoffed. You wouldn't. I walked over to the bookstack and lifted the recorder. I already did. David looked like a man unraveling in real time. Caught between two loyalties, neither of which were what they used to be. I didn't want her to be alone in that big house, he said weakly. I thought maybe she'd be safer somewhere else. No, I said. You wanted control. And Jack knew you might. That's why he trusted me to carry it through. For a moment no one moved. And then Melissa stood face tight. Come on, she snapped. We're done here. David lingered at the door. Mom, he said. But I turned away. Some goodbyes don't need to be said aloud. After the door closed behind them, the house held its breath. Emily and I sat in silence for several minutes. Not speaking, just being. The tension that had gripped the walls for weeks slowly drained out like water from a cracked bowl. She reached over and took my hand. I hadn't realized how tightly I was gripping the edge of the table until I felt her fingers slide into mine. You okay? She asked softly. I think so, I said. Maybe not today. But I will be. That night, I slept with the windows cracked open for the first time since Jack died. The summer breeze moved through the house like a blessing, gentle and unseen. I thought about the boy David used to be. The one who cried when we read Charlotte's Web and insisted on sleeping beside the dog when it got sick. That boy wasn't gone. But he'd been buried under something I no longer recognized. It broke my heart to say it, but I didn't trust my son anymore. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. My attorney, Mr. Cantor, reviewed the audio and footage, along with my notes. He assured me that not only was I within my rights to disinherit David if I chose, but that Jack's clause protected me even if David contested the will. I didn't rush the decision, but I made it. I updated the estate documents, ensuring everything was explicit. The house would go to Emily. The assets would be split, but with safeguards, trusts, timelines, clauses Jack had written himself now fully enforced. David would receive something modest, symbolic. Enough to prevent a lawsuit. Not enough to reward what he tried to do. I didn't tell him. Let him wonder. Sometimes the worst punishment is the silence of someone who used to love you. Melissa never reached out. I suspect she knew better. David called once. I didn't answer. He left a message, something vague and remorseful. But apologies ring hollow when they're made only after you've been caught. I saved the voicemail. I don't know why. Maybe because mothers never fully let go, no matter how deep the wound. A few weeks later, Emily and I sat in the garden drinking tea. The same garden Jack and I planted 30 years ago, when the kids were still chasing fireflies barefoot and the world felt simple. Dad would be proud of you, she said, watching the bees drift lazily from bloom to bloom. I hope so, I said. But in my heart I knew. This wasn't just about a will, or a betrayal, or even about justice. It was about remembering who I was before grief softened me, before silence became easier than truth, before I let other people tell me what I could and couldn't hold on to. Jack left me a will, but what he really left me was my voice, and I had finally decided to use it.